Ahoy, shipmates. I'm August Sandberg, and you are listening to the Quarterdeck Sailing Podcast. In last week's episode, Andy and I shared quite a few sea stories involving radar, but we saved the best one for this week as we believed that it deserved its very own episode. This is the last episode of this season of the Quarterdeck Podcast. I'll be off across the North Sea tomorrow morning doing the Shetland race on Isbjørn. You can follow us at 59-north.com/track and also on the YB Races app. So there will be no podcast next week, but the week after that, our other podcast, On the Wind, will be back on. So make sure to subscribe to that one, as there's some very cool interviews coming up this season. And also don't forget to subscribe to this podcast as well, so that you'll get notified when the Quarterdeck podcast is back on after the summer. And of course, the party never stops over at the Quarterdeck. Go to quarterdeck.59-north.com to become a member, to read, watch, and listen to all sorts of great sailing content by Andy, myself, and the rest of the 59 North team, as well as great contributions from our members. Becoming a member on the Quarterdeck is also a great way to support what we do, and so that we'll be able to keep producing podcasts like this one. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for being here. Hope you are doing well, and please enjoy this episode.
Morning, Skipper.
Morning, Admiral. Is that your official title?
I don't know if I like that or not.
I'll let you think on that a little bit. Here we are, on video and everything. It's
hello, video.
Hello, video. Man,
yeah, we're gonna see how this goes.
Wish you'd given me a bit more of a notice, Andy. I would have made myself a little bit more nice for this.
We're going for authenticity here, August. This is how we do it.
Oh, and you're saying this is my authentic look?
No, it's just a day in the life. You know, we both have small kids. Yeah. We wake up, we sit in the office, and off we go. We don't have time to make ourselves pretty, as Tom would say.
Yeah. Well, it's what's on the inside that matters, isn't that?
That's right.
That's great.
Before we get into the episode today, Mia has some housekeeping things that she wanted me to mention right at the top of this. You are about to launch the Isbjørn 2026 passage calendar, which we're all very excited about. We haven't met about this yet. Speaking of authenticity, that needs to be up by the end of this week. That's my goal. Because you're going on vacation, I'm going on vacation. I want to get that published by the end of this week. So if you're listening to this, Isbjørn 2026 calendar is going to be great. Give us just a quick preview, August. Where are we going in 2026 on Isbjørn?
Ooh, we are going.
Just give us one destination to tease it. Iceland. Hell yeah.
Eclipse. All right. Golden Globe race.
Oh, that's right. This. Okay, there's a lot of teasers in there.
Some teasers in there. Yeah. I mean, hell yeah. It's ready to go. It's on the launch pad. So yeah, it's
awesome.
That's ready to be published. So that's great.
And the second housekeeping item is the racing for 2025. That's next year. Caribbean 600 and the Middle Sea race. By the time you hear this will come out, tomorrow? Are we doing this? Is this going to be tomorrow?
No, this will be next week.
Next week. Okay, yeah. So by the time you hear this will be out. Middle Sea race, Caribbean 600, they're open for booking, and that's going to all be on the website. So more trips coming at you for the website, and that's all I have to say about that.
Fantastic. All
right. I guess if you're listening to the audio version of this, we started filming these. So if you're a Quarterdeck member, you'll see the video of this on the Quarterdeck. If you're not a member, go sign up, and you can watch August and I record these chats.
That's true. Or did we just commit to doing that now? Is this the thing that we're doing? I think this is more of a trial film, right?
Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, we're filming this one, so this one you'll be able to see.
Yes, very true. Very true.
August is like panicking now. Oh my God, did we just commit to that? Ready, fire, aim, baby.
That's how we roll. Cool. All right, great. Very exciting stuff. We're back on, and I'm sure that everybody in the audience has been sitting on the edge of their seats since last week now in anticipation of your radar story, Andy. So we left on a bit of a cliffhanger last week. So that was quite fun.
We did indeed, and I guess I left it that probably the most useful use of radar I had was in rescuing another cruising boat. You've heard this story,
cool.
right?
I have heard the story, yes, but I am at the edge of my seat as well, eager to hear it again. It's one of my favorites.
So all right, this is like something that I think we did a podcast, I don't know, a few seasons ago on anchoring and everything, and we should revisit that because probably your biggest fear, like we always talk about having your like this like the skipper captain instinct when you leave your boat on anchor and go ashore, it's always tough if you're out of sight of the boat. It's just like, oh, I'm not sure I can handle this. Like, oh, I don't know. Is it still there? Oh, yep, it's still there. Okay. And then when you get back on board, you're like, okay, I can relax. So this is like everyone's biggest fear where I'll set the scene a little better. But in a nutshell, a family we'd met in Cape Verde, we'd crossed paths with again in Barbados. We were anchored in the same anchorage. They came back from a day on shore and their boat was gone. And it was just like the worst possible feeling. They see and this is not a big anchorage. It's not like there's like, it's like, there was probably 8 or 10 or 12 at the most other sailboats ranging. We were the biggest, 65 feet from like 30 feet. So it's not like, oh, I just don't see it. It wasn't dark. It's not like they couldn't identify the anchor light, which sometimes happens in like a sea of anchor lights. It was like, no, our boat was definitely right there and it's definitely gone. So I was in the dinghy actually on my way to go for a run. I was heading into shore to go for a run. And the way this anchorage is in Barbados, first of all, there's not a lot of cruising boats there. So that made it kind of unique. Back in the day, it used to be like the first landfall people made because it's so much further east than the sort of arc of the Eastern Caribbean. It's another 150 miles east. So it's, as you're coming from the east, it's the first place you're going to get to. So it used to be like a stop for everyone. But there's not really any natural harbors there. It's kind of just like, and Barbados topographically is more like Bermuda than it is like the mountainous Eastern Caribbean. It's kind of just like an elevated reef. So the ocean just like, it's like land and then ocean and then it gets deep and there's not really any protected harbors. So there's a couple different places people anchor. We were on the northwest corner of the island in a place, I'm not going to remember this. Was it called Charlestown? I think. I want to say that. I should fact check that. Anyway, northwest corner of the island. They built like a small marina there that can hold maybe 5 or 6 boats, but the marina is like real swelly, so everybody kind of stays on anchor. And it's a really challenging anchorage because you've got beach, like sandy beach, and then it slopes out to maybe like starts at like 8 to 10 feet, and then it drops off to like 20 feet, and then after like 20 feet, it's just like straight off a cliff. It's like 20 feet, 30 feet, 40 feet, 1,000 feet. And that happens in only a few hundred yards. So like from that cliff drop off to the shoreline, there's only room for probably 2 or 3 boats in a row at the most.
Right.
So everybody kind of has to line up like north and south to stay in the shallow area. But also in the shallow area, it's like scattered like rocks and boulders and sort of old coral heads and stuff. So it's not the best holding. And in fact, and because you're only like parked behind the island, you're fine in the lee if the wind is from the east, like it is in the trade winds most of the time. But we had a cold front actually pass through. So like Mano and I, we got there after the transatlantic. We ended up having to re-anchor like 5 or 6 times. Like, because, the wind shifted around to the south. The boat was like, we were fine on scope sitting one way, but then when we swung around, we were too close to another boat. And I mean, we just every time, gotta move. One time was in the middle of the night. Another time there's 2 super yacht moorings like out sort of at the very edge of the shelf in deeper water. And there was like a 300-foot motor yacht on one of these moorings. And when it swung around, it was like middle of the night. It swung around because there was no wind. So everybody was just kind of going everywhere. and his stern swung in towards the marina and was only literally like a couple yards off of the breakwater. So they're like, well, this is no good. So they had to, like, using their thrusters, swing back around. And the way we were sitting, they were worried that they were going to swing too close to us as they were, like, thrust maneuvering around to get pointed the other direction. So they called us on the radio in the middle of the night. Mano and I had to get up. We ended up not having to move in that case because they got within maybe one Falcon length of us, and it was fine. But my point is to say here that
one
this
Falcon
was
length is significant. It should be added.
That's
65
right.
feet.
Yeah. Correct. So my point in telling this is, it's like it was a tricky anchorage. Nonetheless, we happily went to shore every day. One of us was always on the boat at night. And anyway, this particular time, I'm dinghying in to go for a run, and the dad, and his name's Paul. It was a Danish flagged X-46, I believe, but the family was Polish. So Paul comes, like, running out the breakwater, and he goes, Andy, I had my headphones in. He's, like, waving his arms. He goes, hey, my boat is gone. And I was like, wait. I was like, what? He's like, my boat's gone. I was like, no, that can't be. And I'm like, oh, holy shit, Paul's boat's gone. And as I'm, like, thinking, like going through my head, it occurred to me that I'd actually seen it drifting without being aware of it. Because earlier that same day, Mano and I had dinghied into the beach. There was, like, a little fish shack, sort of fish sandwich place, like, right on the beach. So we dinghied into the beach, and I remembered seeing Paul's boat, right? They were anchored right in front of us. And then on the way back out from the fish shack, I'm like, it looks like they moved a little. Like, maybe because in my head, I'm like, we moved a bunch. Okay, maybe they just had to move because they weren't in the same spot, but they were still there. And then as I'm dinging in for my run, before I see Paul sprinting out, I noticed that they were gone. And they had been talking. We talked to them the day or two before. They were, like, getting ready to leave to go on to move on to the next island because we'd both been there for like a week. And in my head, it's like, oh, they left. I hope they're having a nice sail. Cool, good for them. and then I see Paul running out the breakwater. He's like, yeah, the boat's gone. I was like, oh no. Oh no. Like, oh shit. Like, yeah, they didn't leave. They're still here. So they had two small.
Without them.
The boat left without them. They had two kids, maybe, I want to say, like 8 and 10, or 9, maybe 9 and 11, and his wife, and they're all at this little marina restaurant bar thing. And I dinghied in, and he's like, Paul was understandably very close to panicking.
I totally get that. I bet we all had that feeling where you're on shore. You just, every chance you get, you try and get a glance of your boat out in the anchorage, and then, like, sometimes maybe you see the anchorage from a different angle. You've gone for a hike or something, and then just, like, you don't really see it where you think it should be, and that little piece of, like, panic just, like, grabs you until you, okay, there's my boat, it's fine. But yeah, no, I can. It must be the worst feeling in the world.
I mean, yeah, like you said, you know what it feels like, but it's always, that feeling always, for us anyways, always resolved itself because the boat's actually still been there. Now to have this feeling that's now unresolved and, like, oh my God, it is actually gone. So, and also, like, so Barbados is, like, pretty laid back and low key. And, we had, like, so now we know his boat is gone. I put the pieces together and was like, okay, well, his boat was dragging anchor when I thought they had moved anchor. And in my head, it clearly had drug off this shelf because of all the things I just said. But Paul thought for a second maybe somebody stole it. And I was like, no, there's no way anybody, I'm ruling that out. I don't think that happened. So anyway, we have our dinghy on Falcon just has a 3 horsepower electric motor. So, like, we're not going anywhere in the dinghy. And because the wind had been blowing from the east, the boat is now, like, at sea. Like, you're off the shelf. It's, like, in deep water. And it's like late afternoon. It's probably 3-4 o'clock. And the sun sets at, like, 6. And when the sun sets there, it's, like, dark pretty quickly after it sets. So we're, like, jumping to action. We're like, man, we got to do something. I had a handheld radio, and I called Mano, and I said, hey, Mano, like, fire up Falcon. We're going on a rescue mission. But I first went ashore, talked to Paul and his family, tried to round up, like, there was some sort of, like, center console boats that, like, looked seaworthy, and I was trying to get somebody to, like, hey, we need help, like, we need to go look for this guy's boat, and we need, like, a seaworthy craft. And everyone's like, nah, man, like, nobody wanted to help. And it was like a Sunday or something. There's no authorities around, there's nobody that's gonna be able to help. So I was like, come on, Paul, let's go. We'll get on Falcon, and we can go out there all night. We'll just do a search pattern.
Yeah.
So Mano gets the boat fired up. We were actually on one of those super yacht mooring balls by that time because the anchorage was so sketchy and Falcon was so big that we're like, fuck it, we'll just go on a mooring ball further away from everyone. And after we'd seen that big super yacht on the mooring, we're like, okay. Normally, I don't like trusting mooring balls that are sort of like, well, where did this come from? But there was a 300 foot super yacht on one the night before. So I was like, I think this is good. So Mano gets ready, gets the engine fired up, and our only chance was like, well, we just got a motor downwind. The thing was too, it was really bad visibility because we'd had all the way across the Atlantic, we'd had these sandstorms from the Sahara. Falcon actually sailed through a really nasty one coming down from Las Palmas to Cape Verde. They call it a kalima, where you get these like sandstorms where the Saharan sand like goes out over the ocean. Yeah. And like it looks apocalyptic in the photos from that trip. And there was sand in the sails, there's sand on deck. There was so much sand on deck that people were leaving footprints in the sand during this. And as you get further west across the Atlantic, like if you look at satellite pictures, you can see this sand in the atmosphere makes its way all the way to North America and the Caribbean. So all the way across the Atlantic, we'd had these intermittent days of like, it's not like sandy like it was back closer to Africa, but like really hazy, like just super hazy. And we had one of these going on in Barbados this night where you couldn't see, it was maybe 2 miles of viz. Like even on a sunny, clear day, like it was just so hazy, you could barely see the horizon. Man. So we're like, all right, well, we just got a motor downwind. Like the boat, I'm doing a quick calculations, like, all right, if the boat's drifting at, a knot and a half, 2 knots, they've only been ashore for 3 hours. It can't have gone more than, 6 or 10 miles. But like if it's still drifting, like it's drifting. So we just started.
So they had come ashore in the morning then, or
they come ashore like before lunch, like mid morning, and we're ashore. They were ashore for maybe 4 or 5 hours, max.
Right. And then you had actually then seen the boat kind of when it was on its way. So that was kind of lucky. You could use that for a better estimate of how long it had been drifting for.
Yeah, true. Actually, it was probably, because we saw it like, let's say it was 4 o'clock when I went ashore to go for a run. We saw it after lunch, which was probably 1 o'clock. So it was probably like 3 hours. We're like, okay, 3 hours. It can't be far away. Like it couldn't have gone that far. But with no, and of course, there's some other lessons. We'll come back to the lessons thing. But like I asked Paul, I was like, did you leave any lights on? Did you leave your AIS on? Did you leave anything? No, the boat was dark. Like all sense of the word.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, okay. So Paul's like, next time I'm going to leave my AIS on. I was like, yes, that's a very good idea. So anyway, so we're just like now motoring west towards the sunset because we had, and we got the binoculars, we're scanning. It was me, Mano, and Paul. Meanwhile, his family is ashore, just like eating pizza at the bar, and we had no way to communicate with them because their phones didn't work because it was like Wi-Fi only, and there was no Wi-Fi at the bar. So we're motoring, and I don't remember whose idea it was. I'll give Mano credit for it because I think he was the first one that said it. But Mano's like, "Hey, should we turn the radar on?" And I was like, "Yes, brilliant, Mano. Definitely turn the radar on."
Hell yes.
So this is where this story ties into our radar chat last week. We turned the radar on because he had no AIS, nothing. You couldn't see more than a mile or two, and we didn't know which way to go, so we just went downwind. So we turned the radar on, and almost immediately we picked up a target, and I was like, "Oh my gosh! Like there's a target," but it was not anywhere close to where we were going. Like we were going downwind. Let's say we were going 270 on the compass due west. This target was like northwest and about 6 miles away. So time-wise, 2 knots, 3 hours, kind of was the right distance. It also, it's putting the puzzle pieces together. There was no AIS overlay on the target, so it was just a radar target.
Interesting.
You could see the coast of the island, and then this target was probably 3 miles off the coast and already off the north tip of the island, so like in open water. And I said to Mano and Paul, I was like, guys, like we have no information. This could be anything, but also it wasn't moving. It was moving like a knot and a half. So there was a lot of clues to like this might be it.
That's so cool that the lack of AIS helped you identify it. That's
well, I mean, if it had AI, if he had left his AIS on, it would have been a definite identification.
Well, yeah.
But in this case, it helped us because we knew he didn't have it on. So it was like, okay, it kind of ruled out other things. And I said, guys, like, we don't have anything else to go on. We have to go to this. But going to the target was going to be like a 50-degree course change from where we were headed downwind. But we're like, guys, this is our only evidence. We gotta go to this first. And if this doesn't pan out, then we'll do something else. So we start motoring towards it, and Falcon can motor at about 8 knots. We were moving pretty good, and it's like getting darker and darker. And we've got binoculars. Mano took some great pictures of all of this. We got the binoculars out. We're scanning the horizon. Somebody's down below checking the radar. It's getting closer, and like we put, I was talking about ARPA last week, automated radar positioning aid. We locked onto the target, and it started then giving us, like I was saying, these sort of AIS-like returns where it was telling us it's this target's course, speed, CPA, time to CPA, TCPA, all that stuff. So it was drifting, or it was moving like northwest at like 1.5 knots. And I was like, this is starting to add up. Like we're like starting to get excited. And then, so then you like, we're scanning the binoculars like, oh my gosh, a mast. Okay, it's a sailboat. Like, all right, Paul, it's a sailboat. You look a little closer. It's Bob. It's doing this. It's got no sails up. It's like, Paul, like, I don't want to get too excited, but like this is panning out now. But it was so hazy you couldn't see any details. As we get a little bit closer, it's like, all right, it's a dark hull and it's got whatever color canvas it has. And Paul's like, yeah, that's what we have. And it's like, all right, get your hopes up. And sure enough, we get there. It took us maybe an hour and a half. Let's say we left the mooring at 4:30. It was like the sun was just at the horizon by the time we got to the boat. And now, wow. Okay, so now, like, all right, yep, that's it. We did it. Like, we got it. We found the boat. Now we switched from like search mode to recovery mode, and there's only 3 of us on board, and we had towed. So we were smart too. So like, because I had the dinghy, and I was like, all right, like, we don't want to. Let's not make this worse. Let's get the outboard off the dinghy and like properly stow everything. We were all had life jackets on. Like, let's like slow down here for a second and not like be stupid here.
Good call.
So we did all this, but we kept the dinghy in the water because like we're gonna need that to go to send somebody over to go and get the boat. So let's keep the dinghy in the water, but take the outboard off. But by the time we got to where the boat had drifted clearly on a current. It was not drifting with the wind. It was drifting with the current. And as we got closer to it, sure enough, you could see the anchor line. Everything was still hanging off the bow, and the anchor had just drug right off the shelf.
Wow!
But what actually was another sort of lesson for Paul when he rolled up his jib, and you see a lot of cruising boats do this instead of like we do, where you wrap the jib sheets around the jib like 3 or 4 times. I'm assuming you do that as well.
Absolutely, yes.
And then tie it off so it can't unroll. So this definitely looks a little neater. They left like maybe a 0.5 meter triangle sticking out with the jib sheets tight. It looks nice and tidy when you're at anchor, but now he's got like a little bit more sail area, like tiny bit, but he's now sort of sailing, drifting with the current and all the rest. And I was like, Paul, don't do that again.
Yeah. That's there's you get quite a lot of speed. Like that first knot comes so easily. So
yep,
that helps a bunch. And you also just want to do that in case do you have a storm coming or something. It was funny this very morning. I got this video pop up because my Facebook account is now tied to the 59 North account. I get all these cute little local updates from some Swedish kind of village groups that you guys are part of, which is
that's pretty
fantastic. Funny. And I just saw this morning somebody had filmed a sailboat in a marina over there where the jib had gotten loose, and it was absolutely getting hammered in its little berth there. So just like the classic, they probably left a little bit of jib out or a little bit of a loose furl, and the wind got in there, and it absolutely just tore it apart. So
yeah, it's been really squally and windy here the last couple of days, so I can easily see that. Interesting little side note. Why that happens when you have a roller furl, you're rolling up the sail, and the sail usually has, or in this case, would have a UV cover sewn into the foot and the leech, so that as you roll it up, the UV covers the sail, and that's like sometimes you'll match your sail cover canvas or whatever. On Spica, we have roller furling head sails, but they're racing sails, so they don't have a UV cover built in. So they roll up, and then I have a cover that slides up the rolled up forestay and zips into place that covers the whole sail to prevent UV, but it also prevents that because it's got like cord in it that you cinch up tight, and it like cinches tight around the sail. So like on Spica's case, it's impossible unless it was like a really gnarly storm that ripped the cover off first and then got the sail. So kind of a nice way to mitigate that. So if you see a lot of racing boats have those like head sail covers like that.
That's cool. I never thought about that. Yeah, that's an additional bonus of those covers.
Well, plus the additional bonus for like race, those canvas sew-in UV things, they add quite a bit of weight to the sail. So it's like, and I remember like when Chuck made the sails for Eastbjorn, that UV cover is actually lightweight Dacron. It's not like Sunbrella, so it's white. It doesn't you can't see it when the sail's deployed, and it's much lighter weight than the sort of Sunbrella typical sail cover material stuff. So just a little aside there.
Cool.
So all right, so set the scene again. We're now off the top of the island in open water. You can still see land. It's getting dark. You can see land. We're probably 3 miles off the coast, but we're off the north. So we're out in the ocean swell. And both Falcon and his boat are doing this pendulum thing, rolling on its beam ends, because it's probably a 6 or 8 foot swell coming in from the Atlantic. And we're now trying to figure out how can we safely I was going to send Paul and Mano across because I could handle Falcon under power by myself. So how are we going to get them safely over to the boat in the dinghy, but also not like get in a situation where now they're adrift in the dinghy and like I'm by myself. And so we basically I positioned Falcon to windward and we tied a super long line to the dinghy. And instead, again, we didn't want to put the outboard on in this case because it was like really kind of rolly seas and I didn't want to risk somebody falling in with the outboard or losing that. So they just got in the dinghy and just sort of took a paddle and drifted downwind towards, I was probably a boat length away from Paul's boat. And we missed on the first try, and I had to reel him back in because I had a long, like, umbilical, basically.
So you're dealing with that. You're powering the boat, driving Falcon, and also reeling in those guys.
I put the boat where I wanted it, and then we were both just drifting, and then drifting them off, and then we got too far apart, so I had to reel them in, circle back around, and the second time they got it, and it was sketchy for them just climbing out of the dinghy onto the back of Paul's boat because Paul's boat's Falcon was pretty stable because it's much bigger. Paul's boat's 46 feet, like doing this, and they're trying to get on the stern, and then they managed to do that. They kept the dinghy with them, and then I reeled in the umbilical to Falcon, and then they got the anchor sorted out. By the time they got on board and got the anchor pulled up, it was dark, and then I guess they led the way back in and I followed behind. But Falcon being 65 feet, we were motoring like 8 knots on the way out. But Paul's boat was only motoring like 4.5 knots against the current, that they had drifted on going back. So it took us 2 or 3 times longer to get back. And in the process of recovering the boat, we'd also drifted probably another mile or so because it took some time. But long story short, we rescued the boat. We get back to the anchorage. Mano helped Paul anchor, and then I stood by while they were anchoring so that they could then come back on Falcon and help me anchor or actually get back on the mooring ball. And all the while, we had rescued the boat, but we couldn't get a hold of his family. So they're still sitting on shore.
Right.
They're sitting on shore completely unbeknownst to them what had happened. They just think we're still out looking for the boat. And like several hours had passed. And they didn't find out what happened until we got in the dinghy to shore, and they're there. They're like, "Did you find it?" We're like, "Yeah, we found it." And it's back on anchor. It's all there. Wow. And then, of course, we then stayed there and had some drinks and dinner after that to celebrate. Didn't get back to Falcon until like 11 or 12 o'clock that night. But yeah, it was one of those things where like Mano and I, so Paul was driving, and like Mano and I would be looking at the radar. Paul was driving Falcon on the way out, and Mano would look at me like kind of like Paul's at the back of the cockpit, and he'd look at me. He goes like, and this is before we had identified the radar target, but didn't know for sure if it was his boat.
Right.
Mano looks at me and he goes, "Man, this is like really, really not cool, but like this is pretty freaking cool." I was like, yeah, man, I know exactly what you mean. Like, yeah, it's like, this is a mission. This is a proper mission.
That's a proper mission. Yeah, that is so cool.
And to tie this back into last week's cliffhanger, I am 100% positive we would not have found that boat without radar. There is no way. The visibility was so poor and so obviously poor that by the time, I mean, we didn't even positively identify the boat until we were like a half a mile away. And it was like, if we thought we were going to find something out there with nothing to go by other than search patterns, like, no way. There's no way. So radar is the only thing that found his boat. And also, I'm not trying to make this like take credit for this, but there is no way they would have found their boat if we hadn't been there, because nobody else was remotely interested in helping. I don't know what other cruising boats even had radar or would have thought to use it. So it was just like right place, right time. We had gotten to know them. It was kind of like a personal thing for us. We met them all the way back in Cape Verde. And to bring this full circle still, the post I made on the quarterdeck last week about the weather routing to the Azores was for Paul.
Right. Yeah, that's so cool. That's the same guy.
After this whole thing, I was like, because they're pretty new to cruising. And actually, this is what I was going to say in like the lessons learned thing. He said they had been cruising for like a long time, but they'd been marina hopping. He said he'd only anchored probably in like the 3 years they'd been cruising, he'd only anchored like 20 times. So he's like, yeah, I got to learn how to anchor better. This is my fault. He was being all hard on himself. And I was like, look, man, like this is a good lesson. You won't let this happen again. Thankfully you got away with it. But like he just wasn't used to anchoring. Yeah. And like, we take it for granted, all this stuff. And he probably doesn't have, like, I'm sure he does now, but I don't think he has that. He probably didn't have that instinct that you and I have, that when you go ashore, you're always kind of looking over your shoulder and making sure the boat's not there, because why would he? He has never had any reason to think it wouldn't be there.
Yeah, maybe. That's interesting. Does he, could he identify what had gone wrong? Like, was he in a bad spot? Should he have more scope? Is there anything?
I don't know. I don't know if we had a definite like reason as to why they drug anchor. My guess is not enough scope. That's usually the case.
Yeah, but especially if you're in a narrow anchorage and you're kind of nervous about swinging into other people's boats or the shore or something. It's easy to limit your scope.
It's. I don't want to say it was definitely that, because when we had to re-anchor a couple times, on this one occasion, the wind had swung to the southwest because this cold front was coming through, very weak cold front. But like now, with a southwesterly wind, all the anchored boats are now pointing to the ocean. It's a bizarre feeling. You're also on like a lee shore, and it's like, oh, this kind of feels sketchy. But it was only blowing like 5-10 knots, so it was not a big deal, and it was flat calm. But we had swung around, and we were in a good spot, and like compared to the other boats, we were upwind of several boat lengths away from another boat that was now behind us. And I was like, okay, this is cool, because I was getting ready to go ashore. And I went swimming, and Mana was going to stay on the boat, but I was going to go ashore to do something. And I went and swam on the anchor again just to be sure. And what had happened was our anchor, so if you can picture this, our boat's like laying to the southwest, but our anchor is like over to the right. And we were sitting, as the boat swung around, there was an old mooring structure on the bottom. There was basically a piece of rebar sticking out of the sand that I think had used to have a mooring on it or something. And the anchor chain had gotten around that and around like a big boulder. So we were actually sitting on this piece of rebar. The anchor was like off in another direction. The chain had made like a 90-degree turn. And there was no weight on the anchor. All the weight was on this piece of rebar. And if that would have failed and the boat would have drifted back onto the anchor, we would have been way too close to the boats behind us.
Oh, shit. Yeah. Wow.
And I only noticed that because I swam on the anchor. But like, because sitting there, it looked like the anchor chain was stretched out straight. We were in a good position relative to the other boats. But it was just swimming and following the anchor chain. It's like, oh, this is no good. So it could have been something like that too, where as they swung around, the anchor got fouled on something, or who knows? And that was to my point at the beginning of this. It was a pretty sketchy anchorage to begin with. And the wind direction had changed dramatically in the week prior to that. But by the time this happened, it had swung back to the east and was back to quote unquote normal.
Yeah.
So there was no definitive reason this is why they drug.
Yeah. Challenging, a challenging spot with challenging wind conditions and the like.
Yeah.
That is so, I mean, man, what a story. It's just, what luck for them that you guys could help them out. It's because I'm like, it might not seem to somebody who's not used to offshore sailing, it might not seem like it would be that hard to find, because it's a couple of hours and it's drifting at like a walking pace and there's a big empty ocean. How hard can it be to find it? But it's just remarkable how things get lost at sea. Like when you start a race or something and you're on the start line and there's like tons of boats all around you. I remember doing the Arc, by far the biggest race rally that I've ever done. There was like, I don't know, like 250 boats, I don't know, something like that. You managed it, so you're probably,
they
you
used to do
know.
between 200 and 300 boats. I mean, 300 boats is not uncommon for them for that.
It was just absolutely on the start line there. You could just look around 360 degrees. You couldn't see the horizon. There was all boats. It's incredible. And then an hour or two, and everyone's gone. It's just completely empty ocean in every direction, even though everybody's heading for the same, in the same direction. So it's,
this is like
easy to lose boats at sea.
This is like the flat earther thing that if the Earth was flat, this is what you could see on a clear day, and they have like the Eiffel Tower and the Statue of Liberty and all this stuff.
That's right.
But I always quiz the crew on the boats that when we do those trips, how far away is the horizon? Like when you're at sea, sitting in your cockpit, and all you see is watery horizon, how far away is that horizon? And people inevitably overestimate by orders of magnitude. Because I hope you know the answer to this.
Oh, it's like 15 miles?
No, you just did it yourself. See, look at this. You did it yourself.
Oh crap!
It's 3 miles. The horizon is 3 miles away.
Oh, maybe the surface. Yeah, there you go.
The surface. So the horizon is 3 miles away. Things that stick up above the horizon you can see for longer than that. Sailboat mast, for example. But think of how low the hull of a sailboat is. It wouldn't have to be much more than 3 miles away for the hull to disappear over the horizon. And now all you can see, especially if there's no sail up, is a stick. And that on a hazy day, you're not going to see it. I mean, oftentimes on clear days, I've been guilty of this myself. I remember this going up to Lofoten, because you get that like super clear air in the Arctic where there's like no humidity in the air at all, and it's really clear. And you can probably explain this. You get like mirages sometimes.
Oh yeah.
But before that, like I've mistaken what appeared to me as like a small white trawler. I'm like, oh yeah, there's a white fishing boat maybe 3 miles away over there. Well, 10 minutes later, it's like a 1,000-foot container ship that all I was seeing was the bridge deck sticking up above the horizon. The rest of the hull was over the horizon.
Right. That's cool.
So that
hull down, as they say. Yeah.
And then if you have any sea state in there as well, that makes it even more difficult to see what's over the horizon, so to speak. So like to your point, that is why things disappear. Because the Earth is curved, and they literally, actually, it's not the air quality or anything else. They literally disappear out of view because the Earth is curved. Like, that's kind of like the coolest example of like the actual visualization of like the curved Earth thing. That like you can see the top of a ship, but not the bottom of it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It's also interesting with like how you found the boat where you didn't expect it to be. That you kind of did because you had a dead downwind, that what you did, and then it popped up further north. Do you think that was the current, or you think that's just what sailboats do?
Well, so it was. I think both. I think it was. It was probably. I mean, because like when you heave to, you drift at 90-degree angles to the wind. That's like a known thing. Now you have sail up when you're doing that. So, but this with his little bit of jib out and his anchor out as a drogue, I think that was maybe a small percentage of it, but I do think it was current because it was quite obvious on the way back how much slower we were going, even like at the same RPM on Falcon. Like there was definitely a current in that direction. Right. And like had we done a little more research, we probably could have figured that out on like the way out. like when they do, I was actually in my shipwreck book I've been reading, when the Coast Guard is looking for somebody, they will drop a transmitter in the ocean in the last known position, and they will track it to see what the current is doing. And then they'll use that current model to model the drift of whatever was there last seen in that spot, so they know where to look.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
What book is that?
That's that. I wrote about it in the last newsletter. It's called The Ship and the Storm. It was about Hurricane Mitch and the sinking of the Phantom in 1998. Heartbreaking story. It was, man, it's, you get into those and it's riveting, but like, man, the descriptions of like, it was pretty tough read, actually. The descriptions of people, like, because this hurricane demolished Honduras as well, and like tons of flooding. I think like 10,000 people died in Honduras or something. 10,000. And like just the anecdotes of mothers like standing on the roofs of their house with their kids in their arms being ripped away from them by the current, and then kid disappearing under a wave and they never see them again. It's just like, as a dad now, it's like, that's hard to read.
Oh, that's horrifying. Yeah.
But the book it's a great book, and I actually took some screenshots. I'm going to put this up on the quarterdeck. There's some really interesting takeaways as far as like heavy weather strategy and hurricane forecasting. Some quotes I pulled that are super interesting that we can talk about related to like accuracy and weather forecasting, and how back in the day there was a way that they forecast the track of storms and built in error before like computer models did this. And kind of the takeaway is like, because Mitch caused all this trouble because the forecasts were, this was like this is 25 years ago, so it's before really powerful computer models, and the models just consistently were completely off from what the storm actually did. And the part of the reason this big ship sank is because it was trying to avoid this storm based on what the forecasts were saying. And it was like a fate thing where in the ship's desire to escape the hurricane, they ended up in the eye of the storm.
God damn it! Yeah,
and it was a Category 5 storm. Like there was no chance of survival, and it was just because the decisions they were making were based on not to blame the forecast, but the uncertainties in the forecast that they didn't take account for.
Right. Huh, that's so interesting. That's Ian Herbert Jones told me that exact same thing happened to him. He that's gonna come out now in just a couple of weeks when On the Wind comes back. He told me the story of how he lost his boat Puffin in the first Golden Globe race, and that was the same exact thing happened. He was headed north. There was a big storm coming for him, and he got routed south. Just go as fast as you can south. To dodge the thing, and then that storm really had his name on it, and it just turned. I just had it right where he was going, and had he continued on where he was going originally, he would have been fine, probably. But yeah, ended up right in the eye. So that's still happens even today.
This thing I'll post. It talks about how there's like you can, not that forecasts are unuseful or anything else. That's not the point. The point is how you can take a forecast track and build in uncertainty around it in your own interpretation of it in terms of like creating a strategy. And like in 24 hours, I need to add this many miles of uncertainty. And nowadays you see it on the Weather Channel as like the cone of uncertainty. They have like the forecast track, but then they have this cone that fans out much wider the further in time you go. That kind of visualizes that. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably
but anyway,
good idea.
To wrap up this radar story, felt great to be able to help them. I think Paul is probably making landfall in the Azores any day now because they were a couple days behind Falcon when I sent them that forecast update, and it was just cool to see that we could help them, and that like, yeah, man, radar serves a purpose to.
Absolutely, yeah, a great little finale to our radar discussion there. That's really cool.
Yeah.
One question that I bet some people are asking themselves, like salvage rates and stuff. If you hadn't been the good-hearted Samaritan that you are, Andy, or if they would have had to, just get some stranger off the beach there to get their boat. What would have been the implications on that? Could they have claimed salvage in a situation like this?
I don't know enough about that, but it did come up. We did. I told Paul, like, hey, if you're thinking about this, like, I'm doing this as a favor to you and as a fun mission. Like, this is don't think I'm gonna stick you with a bill. But yeah, I think how that works is, I could be completely wrong, but I think usually, like, okay, he needs help. You sort of pre-negotiate, like, you either pre-negotiate, like, all right, it's going to cost you this much or whatever. But I think, like, what salvage rights actually is, it basically, I think it allows you to lay claim to the value of the boat if you successfully salvage it and bring it back, like with the like usually through the insurance company, where it's like, hey, this boat was adrift. I found it. It's now mine. If you want it back, you have to pay me for it. Like, because Matt Rutherford tried to do that. There was a Swan 48, a modern, like a Freer Swan 48 drift that was abandoned going across the Atlantic north of Bermuda. Like, this is probably 15 years ago.
Oh yeah, that's a hell of a story.
It just floated around out there for years. And Matt was out in the middle of the Atlantic doing his science research on his first schooner, the 42-foot Alt. And they came upon it, and this mast was still up. I think he said the backstay and the forestay had failed, but the mast was still standing. The boat's just drifting out. This was like a year or more later after it was abandoned. And Matt's like, ooh, Swan 48, I need money. And this was like 800 miles east of Bermuda. So he dinghied over to it, and there's a whole story there. Matt's told this on the podcast a couple times. If you just Google On the Wind Wolfhound Salvage or something, you'll find it. But he tried towing it 800 miles into Bermuda to claim salvage rights on it, but it almost literally sank him and almost wrecked his boat in the process. So in the end, he had to cut it loose, and that was the end of it. But yeah, Matt knew about that and tried to claim it.
That is such a crazy story. It's because he was gonna try and tow. After a while, he's tried to tow his boat with the Swan, and he's tried to get the engine running on the Swan. So we dinghied his batteries over there, and he dropped them in the sea. And it's like,
well, not only
crazy.
Yeah, he had his batteries from Alt in the dinghy. It wasn't that he dropped them in the sea. It pulled the floor out of the bottom of the dinghy, and almost took him with it. Like, the floor just came out of the bottom of the dinghy, and the dinghy floor and the battery went to the bottom.
Holy hell. That's nuts. I just Googled it. Is it the second ever On the Wind podcast episode?
Oh, it could. No, maybe. It could be.
Wow. Anyways, yeah, you're right. Wolfhound Salvage. Just Google that. You'll find it. Very much recommend listening to that one. That's I'm gonna listen to that one myself. It's been a long time. So it's a great one.
All right, Skipper, should we wrap this up?
Yes, thank you so much, Andy. That was a great story and a great thing that you guys did. And come join us on the quarterdeck, everybody. See the video of our beautiful dad faces.
Dad faces, here we are.
If this has worked, and we'll see. Maybe we'll keep doing that. In any case, this is the last episode of the season, Andy. So any more video will be for the next one. We'll have a break on the 25th of June. You'll get to rest your ears for a little bit, and then on the 2nd of July, On the Wind will be back with tons of exciting interviews. So thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.
Cool. Thanks, Skipper. See you next time.
Thank you, Andy. It's been great chatting with you throughout this season. I love doing these.
This is great. Highlight of my day. Hold fast, Skipper.
Hold fast, Andy. See ya. Thank you very much for listening. If you want to join the Quarterdeck, go to quarterdeck.59-north.com. The Quarterdeck podcast is produced by August Sandberg for 59 North. Music is by the Storm Weather Shanty Choir.